Why did we launch the e-learning center and why are we here this morning? As the Department of Education, it is our responsibility to make sure that we are in line with the global developments. It's our responsibility to make sure we capacitate our officials, our educators and learners so that we can compete on an international stage. We know we are currently in the 4th Industrial Revolution, moving over to the 5th Industrial Revolution. With the 4th Industrial Revolution, we were talking about cyber, physical systems, networking, machine learning. But in the 5th Industrial Revolution, and that's why we're talking about human robots, collaboration, cognitive systems, and customization. So for us, it's important that we are following the trends and that we are ready as a Department of Education. Also, the beginning of the year, we launched our Eastern Cape Digital Evolution Strategy. Now, that strategy is in line with DPSA in terms of corporate ICT governance strategy. The whole idea with the strategy is to bring together e-learning, ICT, as well as our EMIS. We know how important EMIS is for our department and also our ICT strategy, but yet also our e-learning. Now, yesterday was the launch of the e-learning center, but the idea going forward will be also to have a satellite center at our Coffee Mbaba Maths and Science Center. Now, we do have some plans in terms of making sure our schools are connected. Already, we are busy in terms of making sure that we're connecting our schools. Our MEC got, for example, the initiative that our MEC started and we are implementing it is connecting our rural schools. We also have the broadband schools. From the Office of the Premier, we have our e-learning schools, and then also we started making sure we're connecting 3,300 schools of our rural schools. So when I'm talking about 5,000 schools, you can imagine it's very difficult for us to connect those over 5,000 schools, resource them, and making sure they're up and running. Now, we're not going to go into the space now and say, but some of your schools, they are due to be rationalized. But they are not rationalized now because there are many reasons why we just don't rationalize a school. But the key point is we need connectivity. We need those learners in the rural areas to have access. So the most important thing is to ensure that our learners can, via their cell phones, can via our satellite centers, can have access to information. So my challenge to all of us here today, what will be your landmark? Are you going to come alongside us and say today is a day of history? It's a day that you will be part of history making in the Eastern Cape as well as in the country. So allow me to welcome you to the summit, to ask you to give us your wealth of knowledge. And as Miles Monroe is saying, the graveyard is full because people decided to die with their potential. But let us say about you, the graveyard is empty because you're going to pour in us what God has given to you. I thank you.
When we started this project almost from 2016, we were really looking at how do we stabilize the IT environment in our schools and how do we improve better our integration of e-learning solutions to the schools. And what we've done is to develop a framework that is going to allow us to do that over time. Firstly, is to agree on the institutionalization of the function within the department, what you might call functions and structure that we wanted to house in the department. Number two, then agree on a package of performance objectives that will allow us to scope and scale the implementation. And then thirdly, agree on parameters of implementation, what you might call strategy. And we developed the first 5-year strategy. We're now into our second 5-year strategy of e-learning. Then out of that, we then had to agree on what we might call strategic flagships of the department. What are these flagships? There are 4 strands, colleagues, that were managing Now the first strand of this is on my bottom right. It's mobilizing support for ICT integration, and we're looking at engaging all directorates in the department and mobilizing all available resources in the department to produce a commendable ICT program. Then number 2, we're looking at capacity of our schools to manage, integrate, and implement e-learning within the school environment by focusing on teacher development, pre-service, as well as in-service training. So those are the key strengths that we're looking at. And then thirdly, we're looking at provisioning of resources. Now, if you look at provisioning of resources, the biggest mistake, colleagues, that we get from people most of the time is that they think that we're working for Pick and Pay. They will come and say, we are selling laptops, we are selling Chromebooks. And I'm saying, our business is not about buying gadgets. Our business is about conceptualizing a functional e-learning framework for a school environment. Now, if you give me a business model, then I can engage because you have a chase theory. But if you sell me a laptop, you sell me a hardware, they chase you everywhere. We have connectivity, and I'm not about that. I'm about the package. And here, when we talk about provisioning of resourcing, it's really about how we package e-learning from point of view of school functionality. So that's the third strand. Then the fourth strand is the digital content, both online and offline. And I should think, colleagues, you will all agree with us. I should think the world is gallow and is splendid with the number of these resources available. It's the capacity and the ability of us as government to engage in that space. Colleagues, education is an international phenomenon. It's not about Eastern Cape in a little funny corner of the map of South Africa. It's so the standards somewhere else, they have developed and they are gone. You can go to Singapore, you can go to Japan, you will find that somehow we are left behind. When we say we'll tell you, we always argue about the correlations in development. You really can't talk about advancing the schooling system without advancing social development, infrastructure development in the country. And this is where the big issue is in terms of digitalization. We need to move with speed, otherwise we're being left behind. And 50 colleagues is research, innovation, and partnerships. Now, if you look at, this is one area that public service is very poor in, the research capacity of public service, to engage with new information. And as we called everybody, and we, in terms of planning as a branch, we said, look, let's try and involve a widespread of colleagues who are active in these areas so that we can source ideas, we can engage on how these mean and what they mean to us as we go forward. So research is one of those. As a result, we are trying to make sure that our universities, all the 4 universities, big universities in this Cape, are part and parcel of our talk, they are part and parcel of our discussion, so that we have an integrated framework. And then lastly, colleagues, it's monitoring and support, just to make sure that when we deploy resources to schools, they work, they are used optimally. We once visited one of the schools in one of the townships, a very beautiful school, and we had a history that the school had been supported with laboratory equipment, e-learning material, tablets, laptops, and when we got in there, lo and behold, I should think this has to do with quality of leadership. We could sense as we were getting in that, hey, this is chaos. And our main concern was whether the resources are being utilized. We got in, principal, how are you? I'm okay. Can you just showcase us how you integrate, all of these resources that have been deployed? He says, hey, I had to lock them up because these are not meant to be locked away, they're meant to be utilized. So part of monitoring is just to make sure if these resources are used optimally. Colleagues, that's almost the framework of the strategy. I don't want to waste Mr. Peter's time. It's just to give you a sense of where can we engage each other, where can we engage the Eastern Cape in terms of this framework, and what can we do to support one another going forward. Now, these are almost what you might call critical projects, as they almost my penultimate slide of what we do. Yesterday, colleagues, in fact, let me start with digital libraries. As you all know, we're trying to shift away from the concept of brick and mortar in terms of library into an e-learning library or digital library, where we can load information and children can access that information using their cell phone. I mean, if you look at the rate of cell phone penetration in South Africa, it's one of the highest. And I'm talking about the poor of the poorest communities. So if you can't exploit that leverage, then forget about it. And this is where we are trying to get into. We're trying, colleagues, to work with municipalities on accessing libraries. But I don't think they have a concept. I saw many libraries that were, just newly built here around this township called Tanzania, in a zone called Zone 14. There's a library that was launched by the presidents with fun and fair. And I went past there the other day. It's outgrown with grass and everything, and I was so worried. Now, you talk about a very interesting concept, digital library, where you can deploy resources just to look at face-to-face physical library and e-learning libraries. Then, colleagues, the most important component is what HOD was talking about. We are developing the broadcasting capacity of the department. So yesterday, we were showcasing a studio that were built and that we were launching yesterday. And part of that studio is to take education directly to kids. And that's why we are looking at these. So these are almost your strategic projects. Now, this is the solution that we've put up in terms of your e-library resources and the basic, equipment that you need in there is a 2-in-1 laptop or Chromebooks that we have, come to acquire, and all of these other gadgets. I don't want to waste much of your time, but the key important ingredients is the infrastructure that you need as well as connectivity, just to access it. Last but not least, Mr. Kira, it's the flagship of the broadcast. This is the architectural design of the studio, and those of you who were watching news from ENCA yesterday, the MEC was talking from that studio, and that is the sort of, you know, our design that we had. So these are the connectivity issues that we're looking at. Thank you, Judah. The perfect environment that we are looking at is the issue of the smart classroom, strong connectivity, collaboration, functional learning management systems, and that's where we're looking at going forward. I want to thank you for this, and thank you, Program Director, for your time.
I could not stand here with both my name and surname having been slaughtered. Least of all, tall as I am. So I would have had to appeal to the MEC to protect me. Whilst we're waiting for the presentation to load, Program Director, there are one or two things that I think we need to state. You know, there's a temptation when you are invited into an event coming from outside that you are bringing a lot of wisdom. Wisdom that does not already reside in the people that have invited you. And I want to squash that temptation that we don't have all the wisdom in the space that we operate, but we are here to share our experience. We are here to share with you the journey that we have traversed as a province. So lower your expectations of the presentation so that we are at the same level. Right? So that's the first thing. The second thing is that I think as a sector we need to start doing two things. The first thing is to put e-learning at the center of education. That time has passed. We are in a situation where, or at least an environment where I think we need to put education at the core of, e-learning at the core of our education. I'm saying this because a couple of years ago, and probably more than a couple, the King 4 Commission put ICT at the center of operations in a corporate environment. And I think as public sector, I think as government, we need to start going along with what the King Commission has put forth. So that's the second thing that I wanted to raise. The last thing is as follows, EG. I think we need to resolve the misuse of, or the interchange or interplay between ICT and e-learning, so that we are clear in terms of what is it that we're talking about. When we talk of ICT strategy, are we talking of the ICT strategy, or are we talking about the e-learning strategy? So that we do not miss each other in the nomenclature. The second last thing that we need to do is to also resolve the conversation between what is e-learning versus what is online learning. So that the interventions that we direct to our classrooms are well defined and positioned to respond to the issues that they need to. The last one is around computer-based teaching and or learning versus e-learning itself. So that when the learner is sitting in front of a laptop or a tablet, we do not term that as an e-learning intervention. It could be, if that tablet is linked to a connectivity, it could be when there is pedagogy that supports that activity. So we need to resolve these questions as we go along. Now we were requested to come here and do a presentation. Like I said, we're not bringing you new wisdom or wisdom as it were, but we're just going to share the journey that we traveled as a province over the last 12 years, if I'm right. This is the content that we will cover. What we had to do was to rate the room. And we had to rate a bigger room than what we thought that room was. This meant that we needed to make an assessment as to where are we as a province, insofar as all the EdTech interventions that preceded the fifth administration. One of the things that we had to contend with was an archaic approach to the rollout and implementation of e-learning and the provisioning of education technology resources in our schools. And I think, I hope our network operators are not in here. Oh, I shouldn't say this, Premier. Premier will protect me. What we are seeing currently is that network operators, and I'm saying this very guardedly, they are doing a disservice to our learners, because they bring in 25 laptops into a room, Dr. Stoff, right? They bring 25 laptops into a room, and they paint that room black. Let's call it black, right? But what goes into those classrooms with the machinery that they put in is not helpful to our learners. So it confines their learning into that small room that they would have painted black. Our conceptualization of e-learning, our conceptualization of EdTech solution goes far beyond what the network operators provide us. So I think it's a conversation that we need to have as a sector. These interventions that we receive on behalf of our learners are helpful. So we had to do that analysis. Can somebody keep me honest with time? We had to do that analysis before we went into this thing. One of the disservices that we had to contend with was this thing called the handover. Right? So we appoint a company to come, a service provider to come and do these things for us. 7 years down the line, we are now ready to move over to the next phase, and we say, okay, right, can we have a handover report? They give you a CD-ROM, a disk. Right? Now the problem is, what do you do with this one CD covering about 2,300 schools in Gauteng? It's not helpful. You're not going to be able to process this data in the manner in which you want to do it. And then lastly, we at that time we were contending with a huge textbook cycle. But what is it that we were solving for as a province? At that time in 2014, there was a mass exodus that preceded the 2014 elections. There was a mass exodus of learners out of township education, or rather out of township schools, who went to subsidized and non-subsidized independent schools. So these schools, you find them in flats, you find them in some houses somewhere in town, and they were appealing to our learners at that time. But we also were contending with a general poor state of infrastructure in our province, in our schools. Lastly, the gap between the performance of former Model C schools and our public ordinary schools was huge in terms of performance. So we had to come with strategies to arrest that gap that we were finding. So up front, we needed, importantly, political leadership adoption, so that this thing does not become a project of some Mukhorosi sitting at the corner, but it becomes a political decision in the province. That led to the departmental strategy shift that accommodated the e-learning, But importantly, it led to a very important decision in the province, and EXCO decision supporting modernization in the classrooms. So not only did we have a departmental strategy, but we had a strategy that was supported by the leadership of the province in terms of the provincial cabinet. This therefore meant that we had almost ample resources that were given to the department to roll out the type of infrastructure that we wanted. Let me see. But ample budget. Now, so what followed that was that we had to define the type of interventions that we would need to address the type of problems that we had. So we consolidated all of our ICT projects that were in existence at the time in the province. But importantly, at the core of what we were doing was to make sure that we improve learner outcomes. Right? Third, because of the state of the infrastructure in our public schools, we needed to change the face of public schooling because we wanted to attract these learners back into our schools. I had the HOD talking about rationalization of schools. The bulk of the schools that we were sitting with at the time in townships were either underutilized, closed, or the infrastructure was bad. So we needed an intervention that would deal with these things. And then the HOD also spoke about fourth industrial revolution. We wanted to prepare our learners for that. So we had to come up with a delivery framework that has got 4 key enablers. The first one, as you would know, are e-lessons. I will not go much into that, but effectively it was the digitization of the usual manner of teaching into a digital form. The second enabler was provisioning of devices into the classroom. Now the DDG is right. We have our friends who come and throw devices at us with the hope that we will buy them. We're not going to buy them if they come empty. We want them packaged with content. We want them useful to the learners when we give them. But the provision of these devices, we also implemented what we call bring your own device model, where we allow learners to, those that we had not as yet reached, because remember our strategy started from grade 12 going down to grade 8. So those that we had not reached at the time, we allowed them to bring their own devices and we gave them access to our content platform. The third one was around training, teacher development, and the last one really dealt with learner evaluation. Okay. Yeah. So these are the 6 pillars that underpinned the framework. I will not go into them. I touched on them as I was talking. Now, we had to quickly settle on a few things that were going to allow us to drive our strategy. The first one was the development of an e-learning strategy. And we were self-correcting as we were going at this. We went into this program without an e-learning strategy per se, but we knew what we wanted to achieve. So what followed the rollout was really a conversation about what is this thing that we're trying to do as a province. So we then went in and developed an e-learning strategy, really with clearly defined objectives that we wanted to achieve, settling on a delivery mode that we wanted inside the classroom. Now I got shocked when I went into a classroom. When I went to high school, I was used to me sitting down and the teacher being at the front of the classroom. But you go to a classroom now, a teacher is all over the classroom roaming around because technology has enabled them to interact with learners at any point in time. And then we settled on the digitalization journey and the choice of subjects that we were going to start with, because we were not going to afford to go to each and every single one of them. Importantly, the implementation modes that dealt with the supply chain issues. Because we thought that we understood the terrain, we sat down and said, what are the available technologies that are linked to this thing that we want to do? So that we can pick and choose those that are available and see that if they are going to be helpful in our environment. The DGSO spoke here earlier on that there's a lot of education technology solutions that are out there, and we had to pick the one that was specific and relevant to ourselves. And then make an assessment on the human resource capacity that we have, because educators are the bedrock of the system. I mean, just a quick point, between 2014 and 2017, I think the system lost about close to 15% of educators in Gauteng. Right? Okay, at the time there was an issue of early retirement and so forth, so we were fine. But some of them in their exit interviews indicated a fear of this thing that we're trying to do. I'm not saying that educators, hello, don't go, please. But they indicated a fear, and even partially the department was to blame, because 2 years into the program, that's the time that we went and did change management. Right? And already educators were swimming in this thing that they are not really familiar with. And our colleagues, that are sitting at the back, they really assisted us a lot in terms of ensuring that we bring the educators and at par. The last point around curriculum conversion, it's an issue that we're still contending with. Did you invite publishers? Okay. So here's a fight that we are having with both publishers and content developers. We cannot, in 2024, still be providing learners with 2D content. We can't. E-books can't still be coming through as PDF and what have you. We cannot. We need interactive content in our classroom. So that's a battle that we are having with content developers, publishers, that going forward, we don't want this 2D content. We don't want it. So if you are bringing 2D content, go back, reformat it, bring it back as interactive. Then we'll have a conversation. Because we need to blow the mind of learners. We must capture their imagination. I apologize. Just a couple of slides, and then I'm ending. And then the issue around stakeholders. We need to identify the stakeholders. Who is it that is going to be useful to our program, and work with them? Not just take anybody that say they can, but we needed to do an identification and really evaluate their contribution into this program. Segregate these stakeholders into the political and technical. And by political, I mean those that have got decision-making powers. Technical are the techies ourselves and technocrats. So this is the framework that we came up with in terms of engagement with our stakeholders. And then lastly, some issues around M&E, we are all fair with us. Just want to spend a minute or two on this line. There were blind spots that we had. Right, because we will not have determined everything in advance. The first one was the repair cost related to the devices that we give to learners. In Gauteng, we spend about between 20 and 25% of our budget on repairs. 20 and 25% of our budget on repairs. This year alone, we are hitting 160,000 devices that we have distributed. Now, all of these devices must come back at the end of the academic year. We must assess them if they are still functional. If they are not, we must send them for repairs. We must update the content. Some of these devices get lost. But the costs related to repairs are astronomical. We try to cap them by saying the lifespan of a device will be 3 years. So instead of starting at grade 12, we are now saying let's start at grade 8. Let the learner go through, same learner, same device, all the way up to matric. with a view to try and cap some of these costs. It was a huge battle, but we are winning that battle. And then Dr. Thabani is here. The national catalog e-books, let's resolve that, Dr. Thabani. But this was one of the blind spots that we had. Right? We have developed our own, as a province, a catalog for e-books. We are now developing a catalog for multimedia content. So that when people say we've got content, or this is the content that we want. So go and develop this. So, right? And then escalating content costs for obvious reasons, those that are in this space, they charge. But then the impact on the organizational structure, the HR element. When we started, I think that the unit was probably about 4 people that were driving the program. It has increased. It's now a chief directorate, but we are still not enough in there to do this thing. Then there are costs related to connectivity that we spoke about, and then system development and system development requirements and related costs. We'll not spend too much time on the lessons learned, but just a few. When we started rolling out the program, we did not think that, well, I'm sure we thought that we would be here, but we did not really comprehend what 2024 would represent in terms of the program. So there were issues related to infrastructure, ICT infrastructure change. We are now moving from physical hosting of servers onto the cloud. We did not think about these things. We did not think about the technology refresh, right? Right. This year is it's the first time that we will be refreshing the LED boards that we have in our classrooms, and we're talking about just under 5,000 devices that we need to refresh because they've long gone out of warranty. Some of them are non-functional. Some of the user experience is degraded. So we're doing a device refresh in the current year. This is my last slide. This is our favorite slide. If you look at that picture tells you where we are. This is a snapshot of what the program is in Gauteng currently. This is a snapshot that was taken in June. In terms of the number of schools that we have covered, the number of classrooms that we have touched, the number of interactive boards that we have installed in schools, teachers that have got laptops, learner devices, and so on and so forth. So this is a snapshot that we took in June. It would have changed because we've already started the device refresh program. Program Director, I apologize for taking that. Thank you.
Let's give the Gauteng colleague another big round of applause. Now I'm very careful this time because I do not want to slaughter this name again, which is why I'm just saying the Gauteng colleague. Hey, ladies and gentlemen, you'll agree with me. Planning that has actually gone to this. But forget about the chief directorate. The kind of planning, financial injection by the big minds that have actually gone intentionally into getting Gauteng where they are now. Thank you so much, colleague, for sharing such valuable information with us. Can you just give him another big round of You may agree with me that we are not a very lucky province. Did you judge that? We are not very lucky. Because for over these years, we have been struggling to provide textbooks and books to our schools because of all the problems that we had. But in the past 2 years, just as we think that we are now mastering it with our publishers, there comes the GD, the Gauteng colleague, to say he does not even want to share some of the things in the presence of our good publishers. So we're not very lucky, because now we must actually consider shifting from that. But thank you so much, colleagues. let me apologize. We shall have just to move one step back in terms of the program. Before the Gauteng colleague, we should have taken number 6, who is now going to be Mr. Andile Stoffile, as I invite you, sir, who is representing Imbizo to come and take that item number 6. Can you welcome him with a round of applause?
No, thank you, Program Director Litimando Kaulele. In the interest of time, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Molwin, Dumelan, Sanbonani, Absheng, Khuyamora, Dimasheron. I think we sometimes, the problem here to at the point where we forget that we are part of a global village. And we think that because we are the home of legends, that everything happens here and is centralized around here, and we forget that we live in a global village. So we must be able to represent as the province, be able to represent the province at a national level and at a global level. Again, I say to you, good morning. My name is Andile Stofile. Let me just acknowledge the Honorable MEC. And in the spirit of EGNU, let me just say all protocol observed. I don't want to exclude anyone, and the GNU is inclusive. So I want to make sure that I'm inclusive of everyone and I don't leave anyone behind. Angela Lungastofile, do not be confused. MEC, while other people are fighting for the expropriation of land without compensation, now we fight for now we are going to the French China. We want their brand called Red Bull. We want to expropriate land Red Bull. Because meaning Red Bull. It belongs to our ancestors. So see together. Red Bull. Mr. Fuleni has asked me on behalf of the Imbizo group just to come and say a couple of words. So, I must declare and be quite upfront to declare that, I'm permanently based in Botswana. And I've been deployed in Botswana for the following reasons. The first one is to, as Pan-Africanists, is how are we able to, against the aspirations, for an example, of Agenda 2063, be able to assist countries to get to those aspirations. That's number one. Number two is you'd be quite surprised at the lessons and how advanced MEC countries like Botswana are in terms of the journey that DuPont is trying to do. And hence we've got the chairman of Empire Synergy. I was deployed there. We've got the chairman of Empire Synergy who are working part and parcel with government to make sure that that which we are trying to do at the Pondway, they've already done and quite far advanced. And so he'll be speaking at a later stage around that. But thirdly is also to say that part of my deployment mandate is how do you then create platforms for collaboration so that it's not just an Eastern Cape thing or a Gauteng thing, but we create platforms which are Pan-African based. So, for an example, one of the things that we are clear and we want to do is we want to be able to have this summit next year. We want to be able to have the Gaborone. Why Gaborone? Because a lot of people don't even know that the Gaborone is the house or the home or where SADC is based. A lot of us don't know that. So we need to be where the centers of power are, where the decisions are about our continent. And so, these are the things which I'm then driving. And I'm very proud to be part of Imbizo Group because at the end of the day is that while we are an Eastern Cape organization, based organization, we are clear about everything that we do. We have to be gearing towards addressing the triple challenges which we face as IPON. Right? Yes, we might bring speakers and have different platforms, but because at the end of the day is we must be very clear, and the clarity is very important, that before we are Department of Education, before we are this, we are that, we are citizens first. And if we do not address the issues that we face, starting with education, that child who we leave behind, because we are solving for the wrong thing. I think the previous speaker or speakers were speaking about, for an example, which what are we solving for? We're clear what we're solving for. If we're solving for the wrong things, we're going to be buying laptops. And we're not going to be solving the education problem, as an example. Are we solving for the right thing? And so it's you know, I think that that becomes important, and it's quite exciting for me that this platform, and I'm very happy that it's being driven by the Department of Education, because if it's being driven by the private sector, here's what's going to happen is that the honest conversations that need to happen are not going to be able to happen. Whereas if it's driven by the sector on its own and driven by Department of Education, the honest conversations whereby, say, you were speaking about, you know, the challenges around publishing and otherwise, we're able to have and deliberate on those conversations so that we're addressing and we are solving for the right issues. For too long, and this is why the output of what we have from an education and other point of view that we have at the moment, the outputs are not what we want because we're not solving for the right things. This is the simple reality. We're not asking the right questions. We need to be able to ask the right questions so that we're able to solve for the right things. So we're very proud that the department is really driving, you know, is driving this conversation. And us as the private sector, us as those, you know, citizens which have got a vested interest to make sure that we're able to catapult Ipondo and the country at large, we come in as a support structure, not the drivers. That's very, very important. Now, the other thing I just want to reflect on, you know, so last year we had or previously we had the 4th annual e-learning, it was in 2019, not last year, the resolutions. There were a couple of resolutions, and it's important to be able to reflect on those, because in these conversations that we are having, to prevent us from being a talk shop, we need to reflect and say, have we achieved the resolutions that we set out? Maybe just because I'm appreciative of the fact that some of the colleagues which are here, perhaps were not there the last time. So the first resolution was that the learner must be the priority. Now, I'm very happy, and as we always do, we always make sure abantwana besikolo are here, because nothing about the learner without the learner. Again, we need to be able to solve for the right things. How can we solve for the right things if we are solving the learner issue, but the learners are not here to be able to listen and influence the conversation? That was number one. Resolution number 2 was around technology must not replace the teacher, but technology must enhance learning and teaching. That is the fact. Now, we spoke about, again, say, you know, the Gauteng, where you had an exodus of teachers. Again, it's that fear that technology is here to replace us, because we always, you know, AI is going to replace us as teachers, all of these things. But in fact, the change management, if done correctly, teachers then realize that actually this is to enhance the learner experience. It's also to enhance their job and make their job easier. So that was number 2. Number 3 was saying that the classroom digital divide between rural, township, and suburban learners must be closed through private sector support and initiatives by government, such as, or with entities such as USASA and Centec and other ones. The other resolution was that the telecommunications operators, they must continue to open more learning material and make them zero-rated to reduce the cost of data for learners. Now, I must put this into context, because remember that this was 2019. So this was, you know, of course, a lot of work has been done by the telcos. We must acknowledge that. A lot of work was done by the telcos, especially during the COVID period, to be able to zero-rate content. So these resolutions, I must put that into context that, you know, they were done then. The teacher laptop rollout, you know, must be accompanied by teacher training on the laptop and the use of these laptops and other devices. The other resolution was that the cyberspace risk, it remains real, and learners must be cautioned on the risk of the internet. The other one was that coding is an important project in schools to prepare and guide learners on analytical skills and preparing them for skills on the new economy, which is driven by the 4IR. So those are that's just a reflection on the 2019 resolution. And I must also mention, it would be amiss of me not to mention that, you know, we need to, you know, just salute and support the vision of the MEC at the time, MEC Makapula, and appreciate the groundwork which he had done to promote mathematics and science, you know, as part of the e-learning system. And so, in closing then, let me say this. Say that forward with the pass mark 85% in 2024, forward. Pambi 85% Pambi. Pambi 85% Pambi. I thank you.
Program Director, allow me to make two comments quickly before I get on to what I have prepared on the PowerPoint. In 1892, the world moved from what was called horsepower to what was called the gasoline power, where the nature of work was changing, and when farmers were using oxen to plow the land and to produce the food that the people were eating. And a small invention was made called a tractor. The introduction of a tractor revolutionized food production across the world. Farmers were at a tipping point of making a decision whether they stay with what they know, which was using oxen, or to transform to this new foreign thing that was presented to them. I think you'd agree with me that those who resisted the change at the time were left behind. And that those who embraced the change of this foreign automotive called a tractor managed to then expand on their food production, tilting the soil in a new way and feeding the nation. And you can imagine everybody who resisted the change, what happened to them. They were left behind. By the time they woke up, it was too late. The second point I wish to make is an tech expert visited a school where DDG, the principals, had locked the technology inside of the locker rooms and were resisting this change the government was trying to expose them to. An tech expert asked the teacher, who was insisting on using the blackboard, asked a very simple question: who invented the blackboard? The teacher could not answer, and he turned to the learners and said, who invented the blackboard? And he picked one of the learners, and the learner gave the right answer and said it was invented by James Pillens. I don't know how many of you know in here who have used blackboards before. The teacher was shocked because the EdTech confirmed that that was the right answer. And he wanted to know from the learners, after the EdTech expert left, and say, how did you get that right? And they say, we Googled. They didn't know before, but they knew the power of technology, and they went and Googled, and technology gave them an answer. Because there is a benefit and the power of technology that it will be able to give you answers that otherwise would have taken days to go and look for. The last comment that I wish to make is that the blackboard, which was invented in 1801, and the tractor that was invented in 1892, teaching remains to be the only profession where if somebody who died in 1892 when the tractor was invented, or in 1801 when the blackboard was invented, if they miraculously wake up from the grave and come back to life like Lazarus, and they go and look for a job, they will still find it, and they will be able to practice. Because they will still find us with the chalk and duster in hand. It is the only profession. A doctor who died 50 years ago, if they wake up, they must go for retraining because the theaters have changed. You can't operate a patient unless you have been orientated to the technologies that are there. So it's important that we need to transform the space that we are working in, which is the education space. Colleagues, I will try to move as fast as possible, and that is a presentation outline. I will not spend time on it. But I would like to give some quick history on the journey that we have traveled as a country, because some may give an impression that these conversations that we are having are new, when they're actually very old. Way back in 1997, we developed the white paper. We were recognizing the transformative role that ICT had to play in education, as I indicated in my opening remarks. In 2001, we developed an ICT in education strategy. It aimed at ensuring that we leverage on ICT advancements. 2004, the white paper on education was developed, and this had a vision of widespread ICT access and confident digital users, both learners and teachers. And that by 2013, the vision was that every learner in this country was going to be digitally literate, and teachers would be using technology to integrate into the classrooms. We have, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, made some advancements as a country. And as early as 2000, there were very big projects that recognized the power of technology. Initiatives like the Kanya project that was implemented in the Western Cape, and the Gauteng Online that was implemented in Gauteng. And on the African stage, NEPAD was driving the ICT penetration, not only in other aspects of our lives, but as well as in education itself. And that many countries embrace this. In the east of Africa, countries like Kenya and Rwanda embraced technology, and they made huge progress in terms of ICT deployment, e-learning, and everything that has to do with digital transformation. And in the west of Africa, countries like Senegal and Ghana were also galloping, and at the southern tip of Africa, South Africa and Botswana, as it was indicated earlier on, are some of the countries that embraced these changes, and that Africa was on the move. Colleagues, in 2015, the president convened a huge gathering called Operation Pakisa, where some of you who are seated in here gathered there, and that we had to develop a new roadmap as a country of acknowledging the role that ICTs and e-learning and e-education had to play in transforming the delivery of education, as well as improving the learning outcomes using technology as an enabler. The president has as well, on a number of occasions, through the SONAS and at provincial level, the premiers have spoken. We are not short of political willingness in this country, because our politicians have embraced the role that technology has to play. Colleagues, we are at a point where provinces have been calling for us, after coming out of Operation Pakisa, and that we had developed implementation plans, that it's important that we develop an e-education strategy, because that was the missing piece in our puzzle. And that we are at a point, as announced earlier on, of developing an e-education strategy, and I'm with my team here from DBE, and that will be engaging with a wide range of stakeholders on Thursday to ensure that we get inputs into this strategy from each of our 9 provinces, from the role players that are in this space, particularly in those provinces. And that is a roadmap with that vision, starting with the vision, and our vision remains the same, that our learners, including in Zulu and in Lisikisiki, must have access to digital technology, and they must benefit from it, and that it must assist them to improve their learning performance. And that our teachers, as practitioners in the 21st century, must be assisted to integrate ICTs into their teaching practices. I do not take the story that says teachers are afraid of technology. If in the banking space, those of you who are here, I can see many of the faces here used to have the bank books, where you went to the bank and you deposited your money, and there was that stamp that was put on it, and that the very same people who are tellers, who are assisting us, operating in a digital space in the banking sector, they come from the same villages, they come from the same townships as our teachers. They are neighbors, they are family members. If they could embrace it in the banking space, why are we saying teachers are afraid of it? I don't accept that story. Our teachers are human beings like tellers, and that they can be able, if supported appropriately, to be able to use technology. Nobody taught them how to use smartphones. There was no workshop for smartphones. They learned on the way, and every teacher has a smartphone, and they know how to operate that smartphone with no workshop, no training. The only thing is that the technology that is deployed, like Mr. Mohoros indicated, it must be designed in such a way that it can be used. It must be designed with the end user in mind, and that the user experience must make it easy for this person, without being pushed, to adopt this technology. So those who are designing these solutions must have the end user in mind, have the teacher in mind, have the learner in mind, have the administrator in mind as we transform how we manage our administrations. There's a vision. And we end up with our outputs out there. Colleagues, the strategic outcomes are listed there. In the interest of time, I will not go through all of them, but they speak to issues of universal access, digital literacy, quality education, because it is about education. These are just the resources that we must use to promote and provide quality education. System efficiency, governance framework, digital citizenship, and meaning our children must be able to use technology responsibly, and our teachers must be able to use technology responsibly. They must not be found getting into undesirable sites using the technologies that have been provided to them, and that they enjoy the sites that we don't want them to be using these technologies for. They be learners or they be teachers. It's important that technology must be used responsibly. Colleagues, the message, and I'm happy that the speaker that came before me and those who came before him indicated about the centrality of the teacher, that the teacher remains to be the differentiator. Technology is not here to replace the teachers, but it is here to assist them. Take away some of the routine functions. Help them with analytics to quickly analyze where learners are, so that it gives them critical reports for them to make decisions on how to assist learners to progress through their learning. So it is about finding that middle space there, moving from the traditional, moving towards the digital, but trying to find that common ground where the traditional and the digital can actually coexist. Because it is not a choice of either or, but it is about finding that middle ground as we move towards a world-class digitalized education in our countries. It's about making life easier, lighter. Children who carry those 55 books in that school bag, bending their back, that we need to come to a point where through a smart gadget, children are going to have all this. And Mr. Mohorosi indicated that we need to finalize this e-catalog thing because it is the one that is going to make it possible for us to move to this type of a future where children are having gadgets and they are able to access all digital content on their gadgets. But from sound educational perspective, we must be understood. We are not saying we are getting rid of textbooks. That's not what we are saying. The hard books, and replacing them only with digital versions of those books. But we are saying it is that middle ground. Why? Why? It makes educational sound. People learn differently. Even here in this e-learning summit, there are people who are on their gadgets making notes. There are people who are having notepads and they are still writing. Why? Because we are wired differently. There's nothing wrong. Some people make sense of what they are assimilating when they use their motor skills. Yes. When they write, that is when they are able to make sense. There are those who are using gadgets. It doesn't mean those who are using gadgets are smarter than those who are writing. It doesn't mean that. In conclusion, Chairperson, when the television was invented, I'm a scientist, so I like inventions. When television was invented, the newspaper houses were afraid that they were going to go under. Because all of a sudden, if you want to know what happened during the day, you don't have to take a paper and read it. There is this box that you buy, and the owners of this television station, they employ some pretty lady or a handsome young man who sits behind the camera and tell you what happened during the day. That the MEC was launching a studio, that there is an e-learning summit taking place in East London, in the Eastern Cape. Somebody would tell people who are not here and tell them what happened during the day. So you don't have to read because somebody narrates to you. And the pictures are not just static on a paper, but they are live. They interview the MEC, they interview the HOD, they interview the organizers, they interview some of the participants. And you hear their voices. Somebody's not just quoting them on paper. That's amazing. But there are men and women in here. Every Sunday they drive to the garage to get a copy of their Sunday Times. And they sit on their sofa and they read what happened during the week or what happened during the day. Over 100 years later, newspapers are still here. Why? Because people assimilate knowledge differently. There's a danger, Mr. Mohorosi. If we just focus on those who prefer to assimilate knowledge on digital platforms, and we try to push everybody to assimilate knowledge that way, we are going to lose those learners who prefer to open a textbook and study. If we say we're only providing textbooks, this It's a waste of money to deliver gadgets because they are going to be stolen. We are missing out on children who would have done very well DDG if they were given technology. We need to take care of both type of children. It is educationally sound to have both side by side. Even advanced countries like Germany and the USA and Italy are still having the two existing side by side.
Ndingatsho into kokubana enye ingxam yomsebenzi efuneka siwenzile kukujonga into yoba kwezi milestones esigqithe kuzo zeziphi into esizifundileyo, zeziphi izinto esingathi xa sijonga sithi sikwazile ukuzi-achieva. But okungamandla kuqiniseka into yobana isebe lezemfundo apha eMpuma Koloni liyakwazi ukumelana nezanzuli zexesha kuba si-institution operator in an evolving society. Society it is not static. So there is a digital global appetite that is happening across the world. Now it means all government departments will have to be able to align themselves according to the strategy that is there. Part of umsebenzi that we are currently engaged on there, how do you package your work such that your work is able to yield the results that are desirable? Remember, we are a province within a country and a country within a global village. A global village that has got millennium goals that each and every country must be able to achieve. So when you talk about the schooling system, you talk of a national and an international aspect that must be achieved. So it's going to be important in terms of the innovations that are there, that are currently in discussion. Remember, we have already started a discussion on the assessment of the math and science in the country. And part of the task inside, in terms of those experts, how do you tilt the balance of forces in terms of the throughput of mathematics and science in the country? And as a province that has got more learners doing math and science, that concept talks to us. So we have invited a number of provinces that are operating in the space, your Gauteng, your Limpopo, your KZN and others, but equally inviting institutions that are researching on the throughput on mathematics in the country in general, so as to inform the provincial strategy moving forward and also align that with the provincial development plan as an overarching policy of government, and also provide leadership and resource mobilization strategy to achieve that objective. Ethamsanqa xa besasiyiqala le program ye-e-learning saphanza buyiqala ngokuxeshana linye phaa ko-2017 buyaqaphela kwane-disruptions ke ezenzekileyo in terms of COVID and other things. But iGauteng, what is peculiar about it, into yoba ikwazile uyirolla out la plan to its logical conclusion. That's one. Two, it has got almost whatever resources that they need for the strategy. Uba ndikhumbula kakuhle, they have backed up closer to R1 billion on the strategy itself. Mhlawumbi ke precisely because their GDP as a province is making them able to turn things around. They don't rely on the equitable share for any innovation that they put in place as a provincial government, which is a bit an awkward space for us as the Eastern Cape, because we rely solely on the equitable share in terms of the budget of anything that we would want to do. But again, how did Gauteng province massage contradictions that could have been in place? Because remember, e-learning must not take out the work of the traditional methodology of teaching and learning, must then comprehend that and create a space of all those educators to be empowered and enhance the development. So you must have a hybrid approach On the other side, introduce innovations. On the other side, preserve the jobs that are there so that you can be able to have a balanced approach in terms of government.